It seems like lately these days that everything is going digital. Back when I was in school, I remember everyone taking notes in these things called composition notebooks. Now everyone has a laptop or a digital means of taking notes. Hell, in certain schools, the chalkboard itself got replaced by this digital projector board thing. But to be fair, all these digital means of doing things made a lot of things very easy and straight up convenient. I think it goes without saying, but art has definitely benefited in many ways when it comes to the digital age. I'm originally a traditional painter, but buying oil paints, canvases, and the brushes can be really expensive. Not to mention when those things run out, you will have to get more. But beyond making art and taking notes in class, the way we consume media has also been very digitized. Buying physical things like video game cartridges and books and things like that have now been relegated to digital purchases. Long since are the days where someone will have to go to GameStop to buy a day one purchase. People can now download games the moment it drops. Reading new chapters of a manga or comic have been digitized as well. Back in the day, people would make sure they caught the latest chapter or whatever popular manga that was out there. And I can imagine the people of Japan had to get the weekly Shonen Jump magazine to read the latest chapters every single week. Now there's a Viz app that can let you read manga just from your phone. There's even an app to read comics from Marvel and DC. However, I always like to read things physically if I could. But with the advent of webtoons and just digital comics in general, people have been taking advantage of the smartphone layout reading comics on the go. And I think I could speak for the majority of anime and manga fans when I say that one of the biggest webtoons that have reached the public space is Solo Leveling. To give a bit of context with my start with webcomics, the very first I've read was Transfer Student Stormbreaker, which at this point is so old, but currently the webcomic that I would heavily recommend is Burning Effect and its sequel, The Grey Mark. It's heavily underrated and I don't think a lot of people talk about it. However, I did make a video talking about it a long time ago, and I'm well aware of the extended Grey Mark universe like Domination and Dating to Survive, and when I have the time I will definitely read those. But when people talk about Solo Leveling, they usually mention its cathartic power fantasy story. I'm not going to be talking about any of that. I could go on and on about how I feel about the story of Solo Leveling, but regardless of how I feel, I can't deny that the art is very good. And behind every panel, every glow effect, and every transformation of Jin-Woo is an artist, or more accurately, a team whose vision shaped one of the most iconic looks in modern webcomics, and that person is Seong-Rak, or better known as Dubu, and the team at Red Eye Studio. And since I don't want to keep butchering his name, I will be referring to him as Dubu for the rest of this video. Also, throughout this video, I may interchange between webcomics and webtoons. Just know I generally mean the same thing. Now, for those that are new to the manga, comic, webcomic making scene, when it comes to actually making it, there are some people that may think they are drawn by a single person, but many webcomics, including Solo Leveling, is a team effort, and the team is the foundation that helps Dubu's consistent quality in art. Most likely people are sectioned to do certain things, like there may be a person that does the backgrounds, someone that inks, and someone that does the coloring, etc, but the main artist and art director that unifies everything is Dubu. And while I do usually split up the video looking at the artist's ink work, colored work, or their characters and illustrative work in case of character designers, since the webcomic format sort of combines all of those things, I'll look at his line work and composition in one section, then look at his coloring and rendering in the next section while talking about things that I like about his art style. This may be very obvious, but one of the more signifying things about a webcomic is the fact that you need to read it vertically as opposed to reading it page by page. I do know that currently webcomics have been getting physical releases, however, since these are being made with the intention of being read vertically, that's how I'll be looking at the composition of certain scenes. And one thing that I really like about how Dubu uses the vertical composition is how he frames certain shots. Right at the very beginning of this story, when Jin-Woo is in the double dungeon, you really feel the size difference among the characters and the evil demon statues. In certain scenes, the panel composition widens dramatically, the characters suddenly look small and they're swallowed by the cathedral-like scale of the room. It's honestly like a horror movie scene with the wide shot, slow reveal, and overwhelming scale. You don't just see the danger, you actually feel it, and of course this smile here only adds to the feeling of terror. Speaking of how things feel, another example in which Dubu uses the medium to his advantage is how he uses gradual transitions that correlate with the character's mentality. For example, in the scene when Jin-Woo is betrayed by other hunters towards the earlier parts of the story, he asks himself why did he forget that this is the type of place where only the strong survive. And in a way, he gets consumed by that belief, the same way how the page gets consumed to black to reflect how he will embody this ideology of getting stronger to survive. And on top of that, the icing on the cake is how the composition is then used to have this montage scene of previous events, and slowly the intensity builds and it reveals this close-up shot as you scroll down the page. I'll be honest, this type of reveal doesn't really hit the same way in a physical format since you can sort of view all the panels and images all at once. but when scrolling down the page, everything is sort of a climactic buildup of hype. And aside from just still moments, action sequences can also benefit from the vertical composition. Obviously, the crux of comics, manga, webcomics, etc. is sequential storytelling using still images. However, with one long panel, you are able to convey a series of actions over a period of time in correlation to how long the overall panel is. To show you guys what I mean, in this panel here, you get an idea that he kills a bunch of monsters for a good while for how long you have to scroll down this page. And another cool way of using the vertical composition is how you get to see him summon his weapons. He is technically materializing them out of thin air, but when scrolling it's like it's appearing as you scroll down the page. Again, you can't really get this effect page by page. And as much as I'm, I guess, glazing the vertical format of webcomics, it can also be seen as a limitation in certain ways. One thing that you can do with a physical book is have double page spreads. Obviously you can't do that with one long vertical page, so what Dubu and the team at Red Eye Studio will do is have a scene be shot in a sort of a Dutch angle, meaning that the camera is tilted on an axis so the horizon isn't parallel to the frame. This way you could get those wide group shots without drawing the scene in a complete 90-degree angle, although he still sort of does have to do that for the very extreme group shots, like when Jin-Woo summons his entire shadow army to obliterate these high orcs. And going back to action sequences, there'll be unique angles like this bottom up angle where you can see the actual roof of the dungeon while having it at a slight Dutch angle. Oh, and this is one of my personal favorite uses of the vertical composition. When Jin-Woo is looking down a set of stairs, the panel drags further and further down the stairs as it slowly gets darker as you scroll. This is honestly a very immersive way to draw out this scene. It's as if you're going down the stairs yourself. Another thing that I want to talk about in terms of Dubu's art is his contrast and use of various line weights for his line work. When it comes to inking, I think it's very important to be mindful of where to make your lines thick and where to make them thin. It makes the art feel a bit more alive and vibrant. You can especially see this in the way he draws hands. The thicker line weights can also bleed into the heavy use of contrast and unify them. I'll explain this in a bit. If you look at the very first chapter, Dubu has Jin-Woo's hair look like this. I guess they were going for a slightly reflective highlight look, but in the second chapter his hair is then rendered fully black, and that later is extended to the black clothing. I know this may all sound arbitrary, but please walk with me on this. Instead of doing the line work and filling it all with black, you could sort of just eliminate that entirely and just rely purely on shape design. If you look at Demon Slayer or even Bleach for example, you can see that for the characters wearing the black Demon Slayer core uniform or the Soul Reaper Shihaku show, you can see that some white will be used to express the folds or creases or even just convey the form of the clothing. However, Dubu solely uses contrast along with shape design in a way that the reader is sort of able to fill in the blanks. Here we're able to tell the cutoff points between his hair in relation to the hoodie, to his sleeve, and to his pants. Another good example of this scene is when Jin-Woo is talking with Yu Jin-Ho. You can see that his hair bleeds into the shadows on his neck to the overall shadows in the hood. You're not going to see this and think it's a disembodied head of course, but the massive amounts of contrast help in giving him a more serious, ominous look. Conversely, in the next panel, Jin-Woo has a much more aloof vibe due to having not that much contrast on his face. Also, speaking of shadows, if you look at the shadow soldiers, you'll see that they are the perfect example of how he uses contrast as well as shape design to convey different figures with what is technically only a silhouette. In this group shot, you see a bunch of shadow soldiers, but despite the amount of black being used, we could still make out each soldier without thinking this is looking like one big blob. The usual standard for webcomics is to always be in color. There are some outlier examples like Burning Effect or Terror Man in which 90% of the comic will be in black and white while color will only be used to accentuate certain moments. And honestly, due to the nature of a weekly publication, it can be pretty difficult already to do everything like sketching out the general composition, inking, fitting it all in the dialogue, then on top of that you got to now color everything. But despite all of that, the coloring for solo leveling is honestly one of the best I've seen a webcomic have. Most webcomics are cel shaded, which is much better for faster production as opposed to rendering everything out. And for those that don't know, cel shading is using flat colors and hard edges instead of smooth gradients. It simplifies lighting to distinct areas of light, shadow, and sometimes highlights with sharp transitions, and most webtoons are colored this way. However, what I really like about Dubu's artwork is that the colors are very controlled while at the same time being very vibrant. And what I mean by that is that there will be characters that will have all sorts of color palettes with different colored hair and colorful armor and things like that, but the palette will be adjusted based on the environment or the general tone of the scene. For example, when Jin-Woo goes to see his mother in the hospital, the scene has this very cold, dreary vibe to it, and it's because the blue tones help with that. If you change the color palette of this scene to a warm one, the entire vibe changes. If you compare this scene to the scene where Jin-Woo reunites with the other survivors of the double dungeon, it's so warm and it gives off this cozy vibe, especially since for all these guys knew, Jin-Woo was dead. I know it's something subtle, but these slight color uses can really affect the feeling the reader gets. Alternatively, what isn't so subtle is his use of the glow effect. Magic, shadows, mana, eyes, all of these rely on that luminous effect layered over dark environments. Hell, even certain environments themselves have this certain glow effect, but Jin-Woo is like the poster boy for having this glowing aura to him. There are definitely moments where the dungeon monsters will also have this effect, especially in their eyes. In this scene, for example, when the King Ant has just killed someone from right behind, most of his figure is in shadow while its eyes are glowing. It's that contrast between light and dark that really adds to the level of intensity in this scene. But as I said earlier, it's without a doubt Sung Jin-Woo that takes the cake when it comes to these moments. I don't really use this phrase, nor do I like to use it, but aura farming is the perfect phrase to describe quite literally everything this guy does. And again, that's mainly due to Dubu and Red Eye Studios' use of this glowing effect compounded by the use of high contrast. Jin-Woo's glowing eyes work very well when his entire face is obscured in shadow, and even the dungeon monsters are drawn with this combination of effects. And remember when I said that the color use can really affect the vibe of a scene? Well, it sort of happens to Jin-Woo himself. In the beginning, he would usually have this blue glow to him, which is one of the more standard colors when it comes to energy. Think chakra or cursed energy. But later, as he continues to level up and change his entire character design, the glow changes to purple. And yes, there is a plot relevant reason for this, however the color change also signifies a clear direction to what his powers represent. And in this case, it's the power over the dead. The blue aura sort of represents a more preliminary usage and understanding of his power, but with the purple it signals that he has now fully embodied the role of the Shadow Monarch. Again, it's those subtle things that really signal certain emotional and plot important beats in the story. With all of that being said, even with the anime adaptation coming out, many fans still say nothing quite hits like the original webtoon. And honestly, that's the mark of an artist whose style wasn't just impressive, it was sort of defining. There are some people that I know that have said that this was their first Korean webcomic. The Solo Leveling webcomic is complete, but if you want to show your support, you can collect the physical books, and although I do think the most optimal way to read this is through a digital means, the physicals are nice to have if you want to just reach into your bookshelf and relive the story while admiring the amazing artwork. And even though Dubu has unfortunately passed, similar to Kentaro Miura with Studio Gaga, he has cultivated a team that continues his legacy with Solo Leveling Ragnarok. And honestly, if you showed this to someone that wasn't aware of his passing, one can easily mistakenly think that it's literally the same artist. But that's just the legacy of Dubu and Red Eye Studio, a legacy that continues to inspire artists, storytellers, and entire studios even today. What is up, YouTube? I am so sorry that this video took so long for me to get done. I have alluded to this video, this artist, Dubu, for the past, I think, 8 months now, or 5, 8 or 5 or 8, depends on when I actually announced it. But it just took so long for me to actually make the video because this might piss off some people here and there, but rereading Solo Leveling was, I'm not gonna lie, it was a bit of a drag. As someone that's read the story fully back to front once as it was coming out, doing it again while knowing the story beats and those pivotal moments, it sort of got a bit samey and boring. But again, this video is not talking about the story or those plot points. I'm mainly here for the art, and that I'll say was pretty good. This is my first time doing a webtoon as for an artist analysis video, so I hope you guys like how I structured and formatted this video. If not, well, you can always let me know in the comments. My next artist, I have an idea, and I will probably post it on my Patreon first, so if you're curious as to who that artist is, go become a member at my Patreon. You don't have to pay me, you could be a free member. I have some exclusive stuff there even if you're a free member, so go check that out. And while you're at it, I have all my other social media outlets in the description, including my Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and I think I have a Blue Sky and a TikTok now. I don't know. I will talk about the state of the art community. Maybe not. I don't know. I'll see how motivated I am to do that video. The artist community is in a state of shambles right now, but again, I may or may not talk about that in a later video. But anyway, that's beside the point. Thank you so much for anyone who sticks around for this long in the video. I have my lovely patrons and free members scrolling on the side here. And yeah, if you want to, again, be a free member and I'll have your name up here too. Like the video, comment, and subscribe. I love it when you guys subscribe. I wanted to get to 25k last year, but again, this video just took too long for me to do. So yeah, anyway, thank you again so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.